Ahoy there, goobers. Welcome to Create and Destroy. I'm your host, Dan Donnarumma. And shit, this is episode number 10. Damn, man. Made it to episode 10. That's pretty awesome. We've had a little bit of a layoff from our last episode. There's been a lot going on in my world, some good, some bad. But most recently, my wife Danielle and I, we celebrated our 1-year anniversary, which is pretty freaking awesome. To celebrate, we decided to go to Maine, and we went to Acadia National Park, which is such an awesome park and such a beautiful part of the country. So we did a bunch of hiking and camping. We both love to camp and to hike, so we hiked pretty much every day that we were there. And then we wound up spending some time in Portland, Maine, which is such a cool city. I really enjoy that city. So I had an awesome time there, and now we're back, and it's time to get back into the swing of things. Time to get this ball a-rolling. My guest for you today is Kyle Bates. Kyle is the man behind Drowse. That's his music project, and he also is a member of the band Floating Room. Most recently, he put out a split EP with Planning for Burial. That was released a few weeks ago now, maybe like 3 weeks ago. And then earlier this year in March, he released the LP Cold Air, which is such a phenomenal LP from start to finish. It's just such a great album. It's one of my favorite albums of the year. It's an album that for me may very well wind up being my favorite album of this year. It's just such a roller coaster of an album. And, you know, I already had such an appreciation for Kyle's music. Sitting down and speaking with him and hearing how much energy and thought and care goes into the music that he creates and what he's putting out there for the world to consume just makes me enjoy his music that much more. As I mentioned, he's also in Floating Room, and Floating Room just released False Baptism. That album came out June 22nd, and I've listened to that album a shit ton since it's released. It's another one of my favorite albums of this year. From start to finish, it's a phenomenal record. So I got to sit down and speak to Kyle about his most recent release with Planning for Burial, his release Cold Air, his release with Floating Room, False Baptism, the time that he spent in Iceland, taking part in an artist-in-residency program. So it was a really fun conversation. I really enjoyed my time sitting down and speaking with Kyle. So here's my conversation with Kyle. Hope you enjoy. All right, man. So, yeah, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I really had nothing to do today, so I've just been hanging out. I've been watching weird 80s synth videos on YouTube.
Nice, man.
Working on music, pretty much.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't have shit to do today either. I basically just hung out with my wife. We watched some baseball, and then I played a bunch of video games, and that was basically it. And sweet. You live in Portland, right? Portland, Oregon?
Yeah.
How long have you lived in Portland for?
I've lived here my whole life except for I went to college in Bellingham, Washington. But other than that, I was like born and raised in Portland. And I really like it, but I've been here for so long that it feels pretty small even though it's a big city, you know.
So I've been trying to convince my wife for the last several years to move to the West Coast because we both have lived in New York she's lived in New York the entirety of her life, and I've lived in New York for the majority of my life. And I got to go to the West Coast for the first time a few summers ago and just fell in love with it. And so Portland is one of the places that we've talked about, even though neither of us have been there, we've talked about possibly moving to.
Yeah, it's expensive, but it's cheaper than SF. But it's really nice. It's awesome. There's like a ton of music going on, and my favorite part is that it's like a pretty big city, but you can just drive like to the beach in an hour, or you could go out to the forest, and it's like surrounded by nature. And this area of the country too, like the Pacific Northwest, is definitely, at least from what I've seen, the most beautiful part of the country. But I'm sure everybody says that about where they're from too. But we have like, old growth forests and stuff everywhere, so it's pretty awesome. It's rainy though.
Yeah, I still have a bunch of states that I need to get to in the country, but without a doubt, the Pacific Northwest has been my favorite part of the country that I've gotten to visit.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's beautiful out here.
And one of the things that has made us think, or at least me think about wanting to move to Portland, is that it is cheaper than San Francisco, and that it seems like there is such a great music scene and art scene in Portland.
Yeah, totally. I feel like music more than art here, but I mean, there's like pretty cool art stuff going on. But yeah, there's like a really good metal scene, and there's like a really cool indie rock scene. I don't know. It's a really good place to live for that. I think I was pretty lucky to grow up here too, because I definitely I feel like if I had grown up somewhere else, I would probably still be into music, but maybe not into as weird of shit as I'm into.
How many venues are there in Portland for like touring bands to play, or even just local bands to play at?
There's a ton, but I wouldn't know, like probably like 10 to 20 or something, maybe more. And it just depends, but there's not a lot of all ages stuff, which is kind of a bummer. There's one that I really like called Blackwater though, that is like an all ages place, but it's also a bar, and they don't separate it. Somehow they get away with like being able to do that because they're like a restaurant or something technically. So there's that. There's a ton of venues though. So like there's places that I've never played that I feel like I should have played, but I've lived here like forever, There's a lot of stuff going on.
Other than the winters in Rochester, because they suck. The biggest thing that I wish I could change about living in Rochester, New York, is we've got, maybe I could probably count on one hand the legit like music venues for like good shows, and it's probably somewhere like 3.
Yeah,
so
that's crazy.
Yeah, dude. So it sucks, man. So whenever there's tours, I usually have to go to, it's not too bad. I usually have to drive to Buffalo or Syracuse, which is like an hour and a half or so for me. But there are times where I've had to go to Boston or Pennsylvania to catch shows because they just don't come anywhere near Rochester.
Damn. Yeah, we're lucky because it's like, even though it's not the biggest city, it's right in between. You like have to go here to get to Seattle basically, and then there's really nothing else unless you're going up to Canada. So most bands that do the West Coast will do like Seattle and Portland, and then go down to California at least. So we get a bunch of good tours. Although I just saw My Bloody Valentine and I had to go to Seattle for that, but they play like very few dates.
Dude, how was that? I've never seen them before, and I've heard that their live sets are incredible.
Yeah, it was insane. It was definitely the loudest show I've been to. Like I've seen like Sleep, like I've seen a bunch of metal bands and stuff, and this was like much louder than anything else I'd ever seen. Like the second they started playing, it felt like I was being like completely covered in sound, and like you couldn't talk to the person next to you. It was so loud. Like there's no way that you could do anything else except for kind of engage with what was going on. So I really enjoyed that because it made me feel like super present in watching them. And they played for a really long time, like maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours, but like I never got bored. I was like so absorbed in it that it was just really captivating. So yeah, it was amazing.
I've never gotten to see a band play for more than like an hour or so, I would say. And then last Wednesday, I got to see Godspeed You Black Emperor.
Oh yeah, I've seen them too. They play it for a long time.
Yeah, dude, they played for like 2 hours. It was fucking, It was so awesome. Their set was so incredible.
Yeah, they kind of have to because all their songs are like 30 minutes.
So long, yeah, and they were really cool. And so you and Planning for Burial got to do a run of shows recently because Planning for Burial was doing a tour. And how did those shows go?
Man, that was so cool. Like, usually I really don't like playing Drowse shows all that much because it's more, for me, it's more like it started as a recording project. So it's like, I really like playing live in other bands and I like playing guitar live, but like singing and playing guitar and like singing these really personal songs is really hard for me. And it's hard for me to enjoy it. Usually I don't play many shows because it like makes me very anxious. But these shows were fucking awesome. Like the turnout was really good. The band that I was playing with, like the people that were playing the Drowse music with me were really cool. And it was like for some of them the first time we'd done it that way. So that was cool. Seeing Tom play 4 times in a row was fucking super cool. Like we played with him a bunch in the past, but he's just getting like better and better. And then another thing that was really special to me about these shows is that like I've been touring and playing music for maybe like 10 years now, not with Drowse, but just like in various bands. And I put out, I think, a bunch of recordings, but I think like 5 vinyl records. And with this new Drowse album, it's like the first time where we actually played shows and people came up to me and were like, oh, like I want to talk to you about this specific thing. Like I could tell that they'd actually heard it before or like, you know, had thought about the music, and like that was really inspiring too, because usually it just kind of feels like, oh, I'm playing for a bunch of people who I've never met before and they don't know anything about this. So I was
going to ask you, when you have played shows in the past, do people typically not ask you about the stuff that you've recorded that was before Cold Air?
I mean, yeah, in Portland they do, but yeah, I feel like Drowse is very cult or underground, or has been in the past. I think since Flenser released this one, it like got more exposure. And like the last EP that I put out did a little bit too. But I still feel like a lot of the people who listen to Cold Air or who have talked to me about it think it's like my first album or something, but I've been doing the project for like almost 5 years, so, and I've put out a bunch of music. But yeah, it's cool to see people like actually caring about it. It feels good.
The lineup that you had playing those shows with you, are those the people that will typically play Drowse shows?
No, so for 2 of them, David and Paul played bass, and then David played synths and like a bunch of noise and stuff. They'd never played in the band before, and so their first show with Drowse was like the first show of the tour, which was kind of intense because there was like a lot of preparation involved in that. And then also it was like, okay, well, we're gonna play our first show like for all these people. But yeah, it's kind of been like a rotating cast just because it's like mostly a solo project. Maya, who sings and plays guitar, has been like very consistent, and like she sang on the album and she sang on the last EP before that too. And then Taylor, who plays drums, I played with I think since I started it, and he's like contributed some stuff to recordings too, but like there's been a lot of different people that I've played with who are all really really good, but it's hard. It doesn't really function like a normal band, just because that's the only way I can make it work.
Can it be difficult at times finding like the right people and the right pieces to make a live set happen?
Yeah, it's mainly hard for me to find people who are like dedicated to doing it. I think it's easier to do that with other bands I've been in where it's collaborative. But since it's mostly just like, okay, here's this music, I've recorded all of it by myself, so you play this part. It's like, at least like if I was in a band like that, I wouldn't really be super invested. So I can understand why people wouldn't want to do music that way when there's like a main songwriter. So it's just hard to find people who like can tour or who are, like down to like commit to stuff. But also, just the way that it sounds live is totally different than the recordings. And I'm also doing like some solo sets and stuff like that, and those sound completely different. But I think it's just like not. I don't make the music like a rock band. You know, I have like 50 tracks on the recording, and like a lot of it's very electronic, and like it's really hard to like make it sound like the way it does on the record. But I think that's fine, because like My Bloody Valentine, for example, like didn't sound like the records, but it sounded powerful and awesome in a like its own way, and I kind of value that. In music in general, I feel like if you're going to see a band live, it shouldn't just sound like a recording, or it shouldn't like sound exactly the same. It should be like spontaneous. So yeah, that's a long-winded answer, I think. But
have you ever thought about playing shows just by yourself, kind of like what Tom does?
Yeah, I think that he's really awesome at that. Like, he can sell it super well. Like, I think a big reason that people love what he does and seeing him live is that he looks like so engaged with what he's doing, and it's like really, you can tell that he's super passionate about it. And I think I probably get a lot more anxiety playing than he does, so the idea of just playing solo freaks me out a lot more. And then it's also like I don't think I could rely on volume as much, because it's not as much of a loud project. I think that would be, I think it's like, for me, watching him play, like half of like the reason it's cool is because it's so fucking loud and impactful sounding. But we're doing this tour in a month that's just going to be Maya and I playing. So I guess that'll be like kind of more like a solo thing.
That's awesome, man. And so will you have like a drum machine set up? How will you have like some of that stuff working out?
I'm still working it out, but it'll probably be like a lot of live looping stuff, and then both of us playing guitar and singing. Probably just gonna make it more ambient and like more maybe folkier. Like I don't know if you've ever seen Grouper play live.
No.
She's great, but if you see her live, it doesn't sound like the recordings too much, because she's like doing a bunch of weird tape loop drones and stuff, and yeah, it'll probably be a lot more spacey sounding.
That's awesome. And is it going to be just, are you guys going to also play Floating Room stuff, or will it just be Drowse?
So we're touring with Floating Room, but Floating Room is like always a 4-piece rock band. Like we've had a bunch of different people come in and out playing drums, but it's been pretty consistently like a band. And yeah, we're gonna tour with that. That's more Maya's songs and stuff, and it's like very different feeling live. So I don't think it'll be like watching the same band twice or anything.
Gotcha. And so you and Tom from Playing for Burial, you guys recently put out a split, which I really, really enjoy. And your music on the EP was from an artist-in-residency program that you did. And I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Skagaströnd, Ireland?
No. It's Skagaströnd, Iceland.
Oh, did I say Ireland? I meant to say Iceland. Yeah.
But Skagaströnd.
I was so focused on trying to pronounce the damn city. And that was earlier this year. How did your experience being in Iceland shape the songs that you would use for that split?
I mean, it like completely shaped them because of how I made those songs. I recorded a ton of music while I was over there, so the stuff on that split is more of this collaboration I did with this guy Jesse, who was a painter that I met out there. But I have a lot of other music that might turn into a new like groundwork for new stuff for the new album that I also recorded by myself. But all the songs on this on the split with Tom are all recorded using like these instruments that Jesse and I built out of different weird like materials that we'd find walking around out there. So like big pieces of wood, and we had like a Texaco oil drum that we dug up out of it was like right on the ocean, so it was like on the beach, and we'd wire them up with contact mics, and I brought a bunch of pedals when I went out there, so I'd feed him through that, and he did a lot more he was a lot more knowledgeable about building this shit than I was, and I'm more of a musician and like good at recording stuff, so I kind of like took it all and recorded everything that we would play, and then sampled a lot of it and like turned it into synthesizers on my computer. It was very experimental. Like definitely not like my normal Drowse stuff.
Dude, that is absolutely incredible, because my assumption was that it was just all like basically synthesizer stuff.
No, yeah, every sound on there is made from some weird handmade instrument, but like I've definitely fucked it up on the computer a lot. But yeah, all of it's sourced from like weird sounds that we made, and I think that's what made it interesting to me. Like I don't know, I went there to like do some strange art experimental stuff, and I wanted to do something that kind of like engaged with the environment that I was in. So yeah, I think that project definitely like could have only been made at that residency.
What I love about those songs too is when I listen to them, I totally get in my head that I'm sitting in just like a foggy like beach on somewhere in Iceland, and I'm sure that has to do with the fact that I know it was recorded there, but it just totally has this like gloomy, foggy like feeling to it, and knowing that the music was created from things that you found and like sourced from that location makes it all the more awesome.
Yeah, that's rad. I'm glad that it communicates that, because like every time I make music or I make an EP or whatever, I always try to imagine like a landscape or a place that it's like taking place in. It's not really explicit in the lyrics or anything, but yeah, I'm definitely always picturing like, oh, this music should like evoke this sort of image or this place. And yeah, with that, clearly I was in this like icy, desolate place, so I wanted it to sound like that. I also kept picturing like The Thing. I don't know if you've seen the John Carpenter movie.
I've never seen that movie, but I know what you're talking about.
It's so good. You got to watch it. Also, like his soundtracks are amazing, but I kept like imagining scenes from that movie while I was writing the lyrics and stuff. So
dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's all like personal shit, but I was kind of trying it. The sounds were so weird. I was like just trying to have fun and make it kind of like a weird 80s sci-fi thing.
And how long were you there for?
I was there for almost a month and a half. I think I was in the residency for 5 weeks, and then I went to Norway for a little while afterwards.
Oh man, Iceland and Norway are two places that I would love to go to. What was the landscape like where you were staying?
So yeah, Skagaströnd is like a tiny fishing village in northern Iceland, and it's right on the ocean. But then like behind where I was living, there's like a giant mountain looking over the whole town, and there's just like you look in front of you and it's just ocean, and then behind you it's like all these huge icy mountains. So it was very extreme, and like the wind would change like every 10 minutes or so. There would be like maybe a quick snowstorm, and then it would be like super sunny and like you're at the beach, and then like it was very harsh, but yeah, it was really beautiful too. And it was cool for me because I was like trying to work on music and stuff, so it was like, well, it's horrible outside, but I can look at it and like stay inside and make weird shit on my computer all day. So
how did you find out about that residency?
I was just looking, like there's a pretty cool website called resartiste.com, and I've known some people who did stuff like that before, so I was just like looking to try and apply for one, and like it's a lot harder to do it with music because most of them are geared towards visual art, but I feel like the stuff I make is weird enough. There's like a way that I can phrase it when I'm applying for stuff like this to like, make it like sound art or whatever. The art world is very like pretentious about the way you describe this stuff sometimes. But I'm pretty good at writing when it comes to like describing the stuff that I make. So yeah, I just applied for a few different residencies. I wanted to go to Norway. I got into one in Norway too, but Iceland, there's like a direct flight from Portland to Iceland, and I had to pay for the plane ticket. So that was the cheapest way to go, and it just seemed really cool. And also, like, I'm a huge Björk fan, and a like a lot of Icelandic music I grew up on, just like being a Sigur Rós. I don't know, I just like a lot of music from there. So it was like, that sounds awesome.
And you'd mentioned you brought some pedals. What other gear did you bring with you?
Just an acoustic guitar and my computer. And then they actually had a little, like, during the day it was a music school for kids, but at 4 o'clock it closed, and they gave me a key. So I was able to just go in there, and they had a drum set and piano and a few synths and some weird, like, very strange, like, kind of crappy synths that I recorded stuff on for other music. So I had access to that stuff too. But yeah, it was kind of limited. Like, it was mainly a lot of computer stuff.
Have you ever been able to work on music for that much for that amount of time before?
No, that was, I was kind of going crazy in Portland with work and just not having time to work on anything. And like, I finished Cold Air, like, it just came out this year, but I finished it in like 2016, I think, or maybe early 2017. But I'd been so busy with all this other stuff that I was like really not getting into a creative mindset. Like, I didn't have very much time to work on things. And I really go into these modes where I kind of like shut down creatively sometimes, and then sometimes it'll get sparked and I'll get very like manic and start working on a bunch of stuff. So I was kind of depressed, and it was like, I need to get the fuck out of here and try to like kick myself into gear. So yeah, it was really cool to just be able to go there and work on shit. And like, I knew that was the main reason I was there. So there wasn't much else to do. It kind of forced me to be creative. And since I've gotten back, I've been like working on music all the time. So yeah, it's really good.
Do you find yourself getting in like ruts artistically often, or do you find that you're able to create stuff when you want to create stuff?
Man, it's not so much a rut. It's more like, I was diagnosed bipolar, so, and I still am not sure how I feel about that, but like, I think I definitely have like really big ups and downs. So if I'm getting really depressed, like, I would call that a rut. It's more like, it's not that I don't feel creative or like don't know what I want to work on. It's just like lacking the motivation to do it. And then sometimes I'll get in modes where I'm just like really, really working on shit. And like staying up or like not sleeping very much, which is definitely not very healthy, but that's just kind of how it goes. And usually it can be like, like 6 months or something where I'm like not doing anything, and then suddenly I'll like make a ton of music in like a week. But yeah, I don't know. It's usually, it's not like I don't have I always have a bunch of ideas bouncing around, but it's more about like motivation with it.
So would you say that your mental health can have a negative effect if you're struggling with stuff? Or do you think that you're able to create things that you would like to when you are struggling?
I mean, it's weird. It kind of, it's a little bit fucked up, because in the past when I was depressed, I'd be like, I would still be really creative, but also like self-medicating, kind of drinking a bunch, or taking a bunch of like anxiety medicine and drinking, which is a really bad combo. But I would be really creative, like, and be like kind of in like a fucked up state and like working on stuff a lot. I don't think that's good, but I think it definitely produced a lot of weird shit. in terms of sounds and music. I'm not doing that much of that stuff now, so that's good. I feel like I have a better handle on my mental health. But yeah, I've been on all sorts of drugs. So in the past, like I took lithium, and while I was on that stuff, I was totally flatlined, like I didn't make anything. But I also wasn't depressed. So it's kind of always this kind of back and forth struggle between, wanting to feel a lot of stuff so I can make art versus like being able to function like a normal person. So
Yeah, I struggle with anxiety and depression, and I don't know if it's weird, but like I feel like some of the best stuff, because I write poetry and I try to make music, and I feel like some of the stuff that I enjoy the most is typically the stuff that I create when I am really anxious or really depressed. But like you, I sometimes struggle with finding motivation to make shit happen.
yeah, because it's really hard when you're happy, I think, to like you don't feel like you have anything to say usually because you're content. So when I'm feeling pretty good, I can write music and like work on kind of abstract stuff like that, but I have a really hard time writing lyrics or like coming up with meaningful stuff. So I don't know, it's kind of like a give and take with that. I have that same thing that you have, I think.
And that's been one of the reasons why for me I've been able to connect very much so with your music, because there is that vulnerability to the lyrics. There is, deep reflections on anxiety and melancholy. And, there is definitely a huge stigma in our society in regards to like mental health issues. And do you ever feel anxious with releasing your music, being that your lyrics and your music definitely are very deep reflections on, basically being gloomy and sad and melancholy?
Yeah, totally. I got really anxious releasing this album because Cold Air, because the past albums were a bit more abstract, or like maybe like I did the first album was called Soon Asleep, and that was about, I was trying to like make these sounds that sounded like how I felt on all these mood altering drugs, which is also very personal, but it was like, a lot of people I know that I've had to take stuff like that. On Cold Air, I was like talking about like substance abuse and like drinking and like all this shit that like I don't think a lot of people know that I've struggled with. So that was like a lot scarier, I think. I think it's hard to feel like you're out of control of the way that you're going to be perceived, especially when stuff is so personal. But it also feels really good too. Like it's kind of like a weight off your chest to talk about that sort of stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of lost my train of thought there, but yeah, I definitely get a lot of anxiety releasing music, and yeah, it can take me a long time to put something out.
And prior to releasing the music that you have with Drowse, did you open that door into your struggles with other people?
Like my family knows about that stuff. Man, maybe some close friends, but not so much. Like the first. So when I was 18, I had like a really bad mental breakdown, and I was like totally like crazy, like for a few weeks, and like lost myself. And then like a few years after that, I was like in pretty bad shape. So I think a lot of people around me saw that happen, so they knew about that. But that was a really long time ago. So when I made the Drowse project, the first EP that I put out, I wrote a little comic book with it that like kind of talked about that whole experience. And that was the scariest one to release, because that was like, putting it out to all these random people that I didn't know, or like people that I casually knew who I was like friends with on the internet or whatever. It's like, oh, here's this thing I made. Also, you can read about all this fucked up shit that you probably didn't know about me. But once I broke that like initial releasing of that stuff, it got a little bit easier. Although this new album, like I said, it was like talking a lot more about recent shit that I've been dealing with. So this one was really hard because it was like less removed from the subject matter.
Yeah, I remember when the Flenser announced that, Cold Air was going to be coming out, and there was like a, maybe a paragraph or two written up to describe what the album was going to be about. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading that, the album was going to be dealing with, you dealing with paranoia, suicide ideation. And I remember reading that being like, holy shit. And so I'm assuming that you had a hand in writing that, correct? Or that is potentially something that you wrote for the Flenser?
Yeah, I wrote it with them. But, honestly, I think they knew, like, they'd listened to my past stuff, and they knew that it was kind of about some of this stuff, too. And I originally wrote like a much less direct version of that, kind of more philosophical sounding, because like there was a lot of the stuff I talked about on the album was also just like about fear in general, or being scared of death or whatever, stuff that everybody deals with. So they kind of pushed me. I think they wanted it to be more intense too, because it is an intense album. So they were like, no, we should like talk about the story that you told with like throughout all these albums, and I was okay with that because like I've already put out like weird shit. Like if you search my name on the internet, you're gonna find out about some bad stuff. So it's not like I really have a lot to lose in terms of like employment or whatever with that stuff.
So like when because you mentions dealing with paranoid delusions. What was that like, experiencing that?
That's horrible, man. It's like I don't know. It's like I have some specific stories that are weird, but like there was a time where I was like going through papers and I thought that there was like another 9/11 thing that happened, and like people were like hiding it from me. Like that's like crazy end of the spectrum. That was a long time ago, but there's been stuff like that too. Even just like the sort of anxiety that I think a lot of people get, but taken to the extreme, like where you think that people are out to get you, or like talking shit about you behind your back or whatever it is, or even like self-image stuff. But like I would be so fixated on it, like with ruminating thoughts, that I like wouldn't sleep for a day or something. Like I don't know, I've had a lot of really extreme times with like the paranoia stuff is more in a really extreme cases, but I think anxiety and paranoia are pretty closely linked.
Yeah,
because a lot of the times anxiety is just you telling yourself like made up stories or fears that actually haven't really happened yet.
Oh my god, dude, that's me all the time. Like I'll be anxious over something, and I'll talk to my wife about it, and she's like, do you know how ridiculous that sounds? And then I'll sit there and think about it. I'm like, yeah, it does sound pretty freaking ridiculous.
Yeah, that's Maya's my girlfriend. She's always having to check me with shit like that too, because I go off on anxious thinking or like future tripping about stuff that I just kind of created, or problems that you'll make up for yourself. So I can definitely relate on that.
And so Cold Air came out March 9th of this year, and it's been absolutely one of my favorite releases of this year. To be quite honest with you, it's up there with like a handful of other albums for album of the year for me.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, man. How long did you work on the songs that would be put on this album?
This one took me a long time because I don't know. I think the first album I put out in like 2015, and I started. I guess I put out an EP after that, so I did that EP, but I think I was working on the songs for like probably 2 years, and like each song was like a process, like a few months, I feel like. So yeah, it was I really wanted to make like a album. Like I had like this whole thing conceptualized kind of in my head about like the way it should flow. I wanted it to like feel like one big piece, as opposed to just a bunch of songs, even though I think they all sound pretty different. Like I think to my ears it flows really well. So I was always like kind of second guessing things, deleting songs that I didn't like, or just like completely rearranging it. So yeah, it took a long time.
Yeah, I think for me, like when I listened to that album from start to finish, some of the songs definitely sound different, but it's very cohesive for me. And I feel like, it's Tom and I talked about this when I spoke to him about Below the House. I feel like Cold Air is kind of similar with Below the House, that it's a roller coaster ride from start to finish. And for me, I remember when I first listened to it, you have that woman Kathy Kroger.
Yeah,
I thought it was
my mom.
I was gonna say I assumed it was your mom, and when I listened to those, I was just like, holy shit, man, this is really heavy and really makes the songs that much more impactful. Did you record those knowing that you wanted to have those on the album, or did you just record them just kind of like for shits and giggles?
No, I recorded this like intentionally. So I had all these, some of the lyrics are like very immediately like shit that I was dealing with. But I also had all these ideas or like themes that I wanted to talk about, like fear. Big one was like kind of like the undercurrent of, chaos or like randomness or weird shit that can happen to like disrupt your routine life. And then just like dealing with those things. So I wanted to talk to my mom about it because she had seen me go through all this kind of fucked up stuff, and I wanted to ask her about her experiences with it too. I just think it was interesting. It's almost like a subplot of the album or something. I always think of this stuff like a movie, but I had all these questions that were pretty pointed. Like just talked to her for a long time and had a field recorder, kind of interviewed her about different things. It's kind of strange. I think she was kind of bummed out that I put it on the record, but
I was gonna say, how did she feel like with that whole experience and then that being added to the album?
I mean, like, I think my parents have seen me go through so much stuff and like are always worrying about me, so they're just like happy if I'm doing well, making stuff. I don't know, she never really, she was okay with it. Like I told her I was gonna do it, but I think it was kind of a weird thing to manage. But I'm really inspired by like memoir writing. I feel like books almost more than music is like the big influence, in terms of how I think about like lyrics and all that. So you have to have some sort of risk or like put something on the line to make something really good when it comes to like talking about personal stuff. I mean, there's like a bunch of great fantasy or sci-fi or whatever, but like I think doing that, like interviewing my mom and like having like this very personal conversation like out there to the public, is a risk, I guess. And I think, at least to me, music that doesn't have like some sort of like risk involved is boring. So I don't know. I had a lot of ideas and weird feelings about doing that, but I'm glad that I did it.
I completely agree with you, man. I feel like, that's what music as an art form should be. It should be pushing boundaries, taking risks, doing weird stuff.
Yeah.
And so you had mentioned that, literature has definitely influenced you in your writing. And I read that for Cold Air, the lyrics that you had put together for that album, they were inspired by Anne Carson, and hopefully I'm pronouncing this dude's name correctly, Karl Ove Knausgaard?
Yeah, that's about right.
Could you talk about the writing of those individuals and how they influenced the lyrics that you put together?
Yeah, so Nausgaard, and also there's two other memoir writers that I really like, Maggie Nelson and Sarah Maguso. But I tried to put them in the bio, and they're like, "This is too long." But he writes very. He wrote the My Struggle series. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's like this super long series that's just basically dissecting his life, like from them just talking about like very mundane shit, like making coffee, to like really extreme stuff. But he's such a good writer that he manages to somehow make all of it interesting, even though nothing really happens. But yeah, one thing that was influential about that for me was like the risk thing that I'm talking about, because his family, a bunch of people in his family tried to sue him after the books became really popular in Norway, because he was kind of talking about people's lives in his family from his own perspective, but I think it pissed a lot of people off. But the books are fucking great. Like, it's a real work of art to me. So yeah, that, I think just like examining your life in like a kind of detailed and meticulous way in order to try to like better understand what it means is something that he does in those books, and that's what I try to do with music. So, and I was just reading those books while I was working on the album, so it was an influence. Anne Carson is a poet that I wrote a big paper on in college. But she's a religious poet, and I'm not religious at all, but she kind of, a lot of her poems are about death, and like this God figure appears in a lot of them. And like, I really wish that I had been raised religious in some ways, because I feel like I'm lacking meaning or a sense of that. So I'm always like looking towards religious writing and people, just to like, you know, try to see why they have that feeling. And her whole deal is like questioning meaning in life, even though she does it through this religious lens. So I want to do that on my albums. And for me, if you just take God and put like music or art instead, it's the same thing. She's also just a really good poet, and I like her writing a lot. So there's an influence on the verse or whatever that I wrote.
I really enjoy your lyrics. When I read them, I totally feel like I'm reading poetry. When you write your lyrics, is that your intention, or is that something that just happens organically?
No, yeah, I totally want it to sound like poetry, because I think I overthink lyrics a lot. Like, a lot of my friends who write songs write much more directly, and I think there's something to be said about that, and I wish I could do it that way. But I fucking like analyze like each stanza, and like I went to college for English and music, so like I've been writing for a long time, like as my other, I don't really release it, but that's like my other art form, you know. So I feel like the lyrics for Drowse stuff is one outlet for me to be able to, like, you know, make poems or have some sort of writing get released to the world too, that hopefully could be received in that way also. It's just, yeah, I don't know. It's very important to me. I really think about the lyrics a lot.
How often do you write lyrics or poetry?
Man, that is one that's hard for me to be motivated with. It's much easier for me to pick up a guitar or like pick up a synthesizer and fuck around with it and like come up with something. But when I'm writing lyrics, or poetry or whatever, it really feels, I think I'm more self-conscious about it, 'cause it's more personal. So sometimes I'll write a lot. Like I try to journal like once a week and just write a ton. But sometimes I'll go through periods where I don't write at all. There's been times though where I was like, you know, I have stacks of notebooks that are just filled up, where I was like writing every night. But yeah, what about you?
So I typically write like there'll be stretches where I'll write at least once a day or even several times in a day. Lately, it's been like once or twice a week. I started a Google Doc so that I could just start writing from my phone, and that's been like the best thing for me for writing.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
But I feel the same way about my poetry that you had said. My poetry typically touches on like my issues with anxiety, depression, insecurities that I have, and that is stuff that I typically don't speak to many people about, like my wife, my brother, like my best friend, and that's pretty much it. So I'm very hesitant to share it with others because it is so personal. And so yeah, I've got a bunch of stuff that I've written, and I've toyed with releasing some of the stuff and doing like maybe releasing like a photo book with poetry that I've written during the trips that I've taken those specific photos in. But yeah, I haven't released any of it yet.
I feel like you should though.
Yeah,
I know it's really scary, but it's definitely worth it. I think at least for me, it makes me feel better to be able to talk to people about this stuff, because otherwise you feel very isolated. I mean, it's good that you have people that you can talk to about that, but also like just getting it out to the world is like almost a weight off your chest, because I think when you deal with these sorts of feelings, you're always kind of concealing it from everyone you know, and that I feel like adds to anxiety or adds to depression.
100% for me, man. Like I remember it was only a few years ago that I like accepted the fact that I deal with depression. I would always say like, no, I'm not depressed, like that's not me. And then finally just coming to grips with that, and then being able to bring it up to my wife was huge. So hopefully one day I'll release some of the poetry that I've put together.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I read that with Cold Air, so right, that the release that was put out in regards to the album, there's mention of you breaking your nose while you were drunk. Could you talk about like how that happened?
Oh man, that is a bad story. So I tried to like take all these little vignettes from my life or different scenes to kind of illustrate that point that I was trying to make about like some weird, you can't really know what's going to happen here. There's always like some chaotic element beneath things. So like I talked about a bunch of dark shit, like my friend dying or whatever. That thing about the broken nose, that was just when I was in college, and it was after I'd had that mental breakdown. I was like drinking a lot at that time and taking lithium too, so it was like a really bad phase. And I broke my nose because I was trying to steal alcohol from someone at a party that I went to, and then I felt a tap on my shoulder and turned around, and they like punched me in the face as hard as they could and immediately broke my nose. But I was so drunk that I couldn't feel it, and I couldn't really remember it either. So like all this stuff is because my friend told me later, but I guess I walked out and I was like, it's totally bloody. And then the next day I woke up and I had like those like huge like blood deposits under my eyes.
Oh yeah,
my nose was all fucked up looking, and it was just like a really horrible experience. And it was also like kind of like totally my fault for being a drunken asshole, but also just like it's just weird when stuff happens that you don't expect, and then like waking up to being like, oh fuck, I have a broken nose and I can't remember how that happened. Like it's just a crazy thing. So I just included like one line about that in one of the songs.
Dude, and getting your nose jacked up sucks so much. I got a big old schnoz, so whenever I have gotten like hit in the face or anything, or like get jacked up in the nose, it sucks so much.
Yeah, it's horrible. I'm trying to remember, like I can't even remember what song that line was from, but I think I just like to, like with all those little snapshots in that one part of the press release, I just thought it was interesting to include some like scenes, because I like it when, at least for me, I like it when music can put an image in my mind or like a really specific thing. So yeah.
Overall, how would you say the reception has been for Cold Air?
It's been really great. I mean, better than any other Drowse thing that I've put out. I think people connect with it a lot, and like on that level that you're talking about, because I've had a lot of people reach out to me and like be like, "Oh, I have like all these issues too," blah blah blah, and that's super cool because I want or I hope that in making music like this, or that's about those subjects, like it makes people feel more comfortable to talk about them. Like if I heard an album that was about this stuff and I really enjoyed it and connected with it, I think it would make me feel like more empowered to talk about my own shit. And it has, like, or with books, like what I was just talking about, with some of those books that influenced me. So yeah, I think the reception's been good, but the best part has been like hearing people who have told me that they can relate to it, or that it's like helped them express that feeling, or at least like they express it to me, which feels cool that people like listen to something by someone that they don't know and then feel like they can, or I'm like expressing myself clearly enough that they can relate to it and feel comfortable telling me about similar things.
Yeah, man. And I listening to Cold Air, even if it's just like dealing with a little bit of anxiety or whatever, it's really nice to listen to music that I enjoy, and see and read and hear the artists talk about stuff that I'm struggling with, which is cool. When I was younger, I listened to primarily just like hardcore and punk, and I was really pissed off when I was younger, so that was kind of cool. But I felt like hardcore and punk, there's not the topic isn't always like depression and anxiety.
It's more angry.
Yeah,
I grew up on the same shit, or more metal, but yeah, there's never a lot of stuff that was like directly relatable. It was like usually more of a big picture, like society's fucked up or whatever.
Yeah, and I think like finding music like Drowse and Have a Nice Life has been how, for me, I've been able to kind of like come to terms and come to grips with the fact that I do have like mental health issues that I struggle with, because I see others that are struggling as well, and they're vocalizing that and they're making art out of it, and I guess it kind of takes the stigma away from it for me. Yeah, holy shit! I've never actually realized that till like just now.
Yeah, that's fucking awesome. Well, that's what I was just saying. I hope that people can feel like that if they listen to my record. That's really good to hear.
Yeah, and so you had mentioned Maya Stoner earlier as contributing to Drowse, and she contributed for several songs, right? For the most recent album.
Yeah, like I'm not sure how many songs she's on, but I think like a lot. Most of the ones that have vocals, and she wrote like a lot of melodies and stuff. Yeah, she's great.
What's it like to be able to work with her for your personal project?
It's kind of weird because she's my girlfriend. So we also have our like a floating room, that band that we do together too, and that one is easier. But with Drowse, it's hard because it's like sometimes I'll be singing about stuff that like I didn't talk to her about. So I'll be like, hey, can you work on this song with me? And then I'll have to like tell this backstory, and like sometimes I won't know if I want to go into it. So it's kind of intense in that way. But also, like I said, with that risk thing with music, I think it's cool to like set up these situations that are kind of uncomfortable. Because I think I think when you listen to stuff, you can feel if it's real or not. Mm-hmm. And that's really important to me, to like have it be as real as possible.
And so, yeah, you mentioned that you're also in Floating Room with Maya, and you guys released False Baptism, which it came out like a month and a half or so ago? Month ago?
Yeah, I think it was in, I don't remember the release date, but pretty recently.
Yeah, I think I feel like it was in June sometime. But shit, man, I have been listening to that album so freaking much. It is such a wonderful album. It's so great. How is it? How different is it for you working on material for Floating Room as opposed to the material that you work on for Drowse?
That's like completely different. It's a lot more fun for me, because it's more like it's a very personal project, but it's all Maya's stuff. So, like, she's the main songwriter. You should try to talk to her. I know that she mentioned that you were talking about trying to do an interview with her, but yeah, she could probably speak on it a lot better than I can. On my end, I just like write cool guitar parts and like get to fuck around with the sound and stuff. So it's more of a fun project for me. For her, it's very personal and intense, but like I said, when I play live in that band, I love it. It's I just get to play guitar and fuck with pedals the whole time, so it's cool.
Yeah, I read that not only do you play guitar, synth, do vocals, but you also play a vibraphone, which I had no clue what a vibraphone was, so I had to Google it. It looks awesome as hell, man. So it's basically just like, it looks like a bigger version of like a xylophone.
Yeah, it's like but it's made with metal. Yeah, I play that on the record at the end of it, but I don't have one. We just recorded that album at the studio called The Unknown, which is actually owned by Phil from Mount Erie. And it's up in Anacortes. It's like this old church that got converted into a studio, and it's really amazing. So they just had a bunch of weird instruments. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try to do this part for this song. But yeah, the vibraphone sounds super cool. I wish I owned one. They're really big and expensive though.
Yeah, dude. So I was wondering, like, how much fun is it to mess around with one of those? Because when I saw what that looked like, it was like, oh man, that would probably be awesome to play around with.
Yeah, it's insane. It's like it's kind of like a piano. Like, it kind of works like that, but it's much dronier sounding. And I was playing it in this huge church, so it was like giant and echoey sounding. But yeah, I don't really know how to play it exactly. We just kind of like came up with some simple parts on it on the album.
And I saw recently on Instagram you posted a photo of like a bunch of Casios that you've gotten. Do you typically write with like one or two, or do you kind of just mess around with a bunch of them and see what you could come up with?
Well, I usually write everything on guitar first, and then I will like write melodies and stuff with Casios and synths or whatever. A lot of those are like recent ones that I just got because I kind of went into a phase because they're so cheap, and they sound pretty awesome. But yeah, I'm really into synths, and I use a lot of synths on the Drowse stuff. So I don't know. I've been recently getting a lot more into like programming synth sounds, and I did a lot of that stuff on the computer, but I have a few, like, I can show you. I have like that's like this Insonic synth from the 80s. Yeah, I just I don't know. I like those sounds. You can get a lot of weird shit that you can't really make with anything else. Casios specifically, I think, are cool because they're so cheap, but they're like made in the 80s, and they sound really warm and like lo-fi and like kind of like automatically messed up, and I'm always looking for stuff that's kind of like slightly off sounding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I never messed around with synths before, and then it was back around, I think, like Christmas. I downloaded Fruity Loops, and there's like a bunch of different like synth stuff on there, and at first it was like overload, man. I was kind of like paralysis by analysis because I could like, just make. What the hell do I do? Yeah, because you can make so many different freaking sounds. But within the last like few weeks, I've started to like figure out like how to actually make stuff on there with it, and it's so awesome.
Yeah, you can really get lost in that world very easily. One thing that I like to do is I'll take those Casios or like the other synth or stuff I make on my computer and like run it through guitar amps and then re-record it that way so it sounds like a guitar, like distort it. And then I also really like to record it to like a 4-track tape machine so it gets kind of more messed up and warbly sounding. Because like a lot of the computer synths are really cool, but to me it sounds too perfect or kind of cold.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've used a ton of computer stuff too. I don't. Did you listen to that Blackwing album?
Dude, I absolutely love that album.
Yeah, those synth sounds are amazing, and I think he made like most of it in Fruity Loops, or I think it's like all digital synths, but it sounds fucking awesome.
That gives me hope, man, because I think it was 2016 that album came out or something like that, 2015. Holy shit, man! I listened to that album like it was like beating a dead horse. I listened to that album so much, so good.
Yeah, I love it.
What have you been jamming lately? Like, what type of albums or bands have you been rocking?
I don't really. I feel like I'm really out of the loop with like new music most of the time. I'm always going back to listen to like old stuff for some reason. I don't really know why. But a lot of krautrock, like Can or Noi, and like Tangerine Dream. Like I said, I was like really fucking around with synths, so that was cool. This is what's on my record player, Boards of Canada.
Nice.
It's like the last thing I was listening to. A lot of black metal. Like I'm always listening to mostly just like 90s Norwegian black metal. Like I've listened to a ton of newer bands and stuff too, but I just love that music. Like that's kind of what I grew up on. And my friend Taylor has a project called Being Alone that he plays drums and jazz. I think that band is really cool. There's like a lot of the new stuff I listen to is just like my friends' bands from Portland for the most part.
Nice. Are you into Panopticon?
Yeah, I'm pretty into it. Although it can get like a little bit too like technical for me or something. Like I'm not like I used to be into like really shreddy stuff growing up, but like not so much now. But I like the whole concept of the band. And I like the fact that he uses like so many weird non-traditional sounds.
Yeah. I bring that up because that's...
What?
I bring that up because that's like... Panopticon is up... what is it called? Like the Scars of the Wilderness, or the Scars of Man in the Once Nameless Wilderness.
Yeah.
That album has been been absolutely incredible. I've listened to it a shit ton since it's come out. So that's another album that's like one of my favorite of this year.
Did that just come out?
It was
okay,
like,
cool. Yeah, I'll have to check it out because I didn't even know he had a new.
Yeah, I think it was like April, maybe. Oh man, sometime around there. It's kind of cool because he kind of splits up his. It's like 20 songs, so it's 2 parts. And so the first part is more like just his metal stuff, and then the second part is more of his like folk stuff. So it's kind of cool. Yeah, part 1 is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, because I kind of like his more raw sounding metal stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll check that. I'm more drawn in terms of U.S. metal. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, like at the time when all that kind of Cascadian black metal stuff was going on. So a lot of the stuff that I was listening to in high school was like Wolves in the Throne Room because they were just coming out. Stuff like that, like I really dig. And then like Zasther is like one of my favorites, and also like a big influence on Drowse, even though it doesn't sound like metal, but like just, weird home recording shit. That's what I really like black metal because it's like so raw and like you can like, it doesn't sound fake. Like a lot of metal to me sounds like very studio recorded, and like it sounds like it could have been made just with a computer that's like emulating guitars or something. But black metal usually sounds like you're in a room with the people playing it. Yeah,
and I feel like I interviewed a dude from Funeral Advantage. We were kind of talking about like black metal and shoegaze and like post rock, and how they all kind of relate to each other, and that they're all very like atmospheric. And and that's one of the things I do really like about black metal, is that it can be very atmospheric at times and very emotionally driven.
Yeah, it's totally like all those genres like just kind of create a big wall of sound a lot of the time, which is what I'm always drawn to that. So
Any upcoming plans for Drowse and Floating Rooms? I know you said that you guys are going to be doing a tour, right?
Yeah, in September. So there's that, and then I'm gonna just try to start working on a new album because I have like so many ideas for it right now, and it's been, like I said, that album just came out, but like I finished it a long time ago. So I have a lot of random stuff recorded on my computer that I need to sift through. And usually, like with Cold Air, I kind of sat down and I was like, "This is what I want to talk about." I have these themes, and I have a lot of ideas like that going around in my head right now. So I just need to, like, after this tour, I'm just gonna try to like not play shows for a little bit and try to work on finishing a new thing.
Sweet. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. It was really good talking to you. Thanks for
yeah, likewise.
Yeah, thanks for opening up about all that stuff too.
Yeah, man. I can't believe you got me to talk about that shit.
Yeah.
All right, sweet. Thanks, man.
Yeah, have a good night.
And there you have it, folks. That's my conversation with Kyle Bates. I think it's really awesome that Kyle mentioned that during his time in Iceland, he would go and find shit on the beach or in the surrounding area where he was staying, and he used that stuff to help create the sound that would become the songs for the split EP that he put out with Planning for Burial. I think that's so cool. And again, it just makes me appreciate Kyle's music that much more, just knowing everything that goes into him crafting his music. Kyle and I, we talked about our mental health issues that we both struggle with. And as I mentioned to Kyle, that's something that I have for some time not felt very comfortable speaking to others about. And I find it interesting that I have felt more open and comfortable about sharing those struggles that I have with you folks. And it's made me feel better about it. I think having music like Drowse and music like Carl Jean, Planning for Burial, and a bunch of other bands that I listen to that delve into struggles that they deal with, I guess makes me feel more comfortable about talking about that. And, I kind of had that epiphany while I was talking to Kyle, which is kind of cool. So I really enjoyed my conversation with Kyle, and, I appreciate the fact that I could have a conversation like this and speak to someone that I admire and learn some cool things, and then also speak to him about some things that I'm doing and have an epiphany as well. Kind of cool. I'll make sure to add links in the show notes to how you could check out Drowse, how you could check out Floating Room. Make sure to cop some of their music and any merchandise of theirs. Check them out. As Kyle mentioned, they're going to be going on tour soon. If you can, go to a show. I wish they were coming to the East Coast. I would love to see them play. Make sure to follow Create and Destroy on social media. You can follow the show on Instagram, Tumblr, Facebook, all at Create and Destroy Podcast, and on Twitter at CreateDestroy_. As always, guys, get out there, create something cool. I'll see you next time.